God never created death. God never created Satan. Moses was using a parable to communicate spiritual realities. That's why believers don't die. Believers sleep. Temptation is not a sin.
Thank you so much. I want you to like this video, share your comments down there, and then share this video. Let us deliver people from darkness to light.
God did not create the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. So where did the tree of the knowledge of good and evil come from? It grew up from the ground. God finished creation in chapter 1. 31, everything was good. Chapter 2 verse 1, God rested. Then in chapter 2, we see the tree of the knowledge of good and evil growing. The tree of the knowledge of good and evil was not in Genesis 1. It wasn't God who created it. God created trees and herbs and told man to eat they have for his body. But then in chapter 2, we see a tree growing that did not exist in chapter 1. Now, remember, the book of Genesis was Moses' teaching notes. And when a teacher is teaching for the purpose of the understanding of his audience, he could use analogies and parables. There was no tree of the knowledge of good and evil in chapter 2. But there was a tree of the knowledge of good and evil in chapter 2. Please put on your thinking caps. Moses was teaching. So he uses parables. A parable has a fact, a fiction, and a little lesson. Out of the ground, not from God. The tree of the knowledge of good and evil grew out of the ground. So if Moses was using a parable in Genesis, what is the ground? The heart of man. What is the tree of the knowledge of good and evil? Evil thoughts. Moses was using a parable, parabole, the Greek word, to communicate spiritual realities. So the tree of the knowledge of good and evil were thoughts that grew out of a man. How do we know that? Brother Paul, wherefore as by one man sin entered into the world, and death by sin. So man is the architect of sin and the architect of death. God never created death. That is why death is an enemy of God. The last enemy that shall be destroyed is death. I'm teaching here. So when you see people dying, it's not God in operation. It is God's enemy. That's why believers don't die. Genesis chapter 2 verse number 16. And the Lord God commanded the man, saying, of every tree of the garden thou mayest freely eat. Next verse. But of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil thou shalt not eat of it. For in the day that thou eatest thereof, thou shalt surely die. The day you eat, you shall surely die. Did you observe God's statement? He didn't say, the day you eat, I will kill you. So the statement was not a reaction. The statement was a love information. The day you eat of it, you shall surely die. I will not be the one to kill you. That's very important. The day you eat, you shall surely die. He didn't say the day you eat, I will kill you. Please, that's very instructive. You shall surely die. Which means that statement is the love of God in action. So how does Brother Paul explain that statement? Romans chapter 5 verse 12. Wherefore, as by one man sin entered into the world, and death by sin. Did he say death by God? Death by who? Death by sin, not by God. And so death passed upon all men, for that all have sinned. So what was God revealing to Adam when he says, the day you eat, you shall die? God was revealing sin to Adam. God was revealing sin to Adam. That wasn't a reaction because nothing had happened. It was not a reaction. Remember, there was no death in existence when God created the universe. There was no death. God never created death. God never brought death. Death was not God's invention. Why? Because all that God created is plainly stated in Genesis chapter 1. And at the end of chapter 1, look at the summary of all of God's creation. Genesis chapter 1 verse 31. And God saw everything that he had made, and behold, help me, it was. And the evening and the morning were the sixth day. So everything God created was very good, meaning God never created death.